If you have ever felt completely disconnected from your tarot practice, trust me, you are not alone. Tarot blocks can happen to everyone, even readers who have been at this for years. I know because I've been there myself, and I specifically remember a time when I felt like every reading I did was falling really flat. The cards felt really distant, my intuition was very foggy. I started to wonder if I had lost my connection to tarot altogether. It was very frustrating to go through, and I even questioned if I was bad at tarot. But in truth, practice blocks aren't a sign that you're doing something wrong. They're just a natural part of the journey. And it just calls forward maybe it's time to change something up. So today I want to talk about why these blocks can happen, and more importantly, what we can do to move through them with self-compassion and curiosity rather than frustration, because I know it gets so hard to see your way out of a practice block. As I speak here today, I wanted to have something beautiful for you guys to look at while I talk. So I have the Burning Tiger Tarot here, and let's jump into why this block is happening. What are some reasons why it might be happening? And before we can jump into trying to fix a tarot block, we first have to understand what's causing it, because without that, we are more likely to kind of throw in the towel and give up. So let's take a step back and let's ask a few questions. Asking these questions for myself has really helped me to sustain my practice and make shifts where needed. So the first question to ask is, am I feeling overwhelmed or burnt out? Perhaps life is just a lot right now and tarot is taking a backseat, or perhaps it's even adding more to the exhaustion, but that's okay. We just need to acknowledge that and note it down. Another question to ask is, am I struggling with self-doubt or imposter syndrome? Maybe you feel like your readings aren't good enough, or you're second guessing your intuition. And trust me, I've been there too. I actually struggle with that quite often, especially nowadays where we are consuming a lot of media, a lot of videos, and while I think it's a beautiful thing because we have a community here and we can reach out for support and be there for one another, it's also hard not to compare yourself to other people and their practice, and we don't always see the in-between days between filming, right? We don't always see that. We don't get to hear the, hey guys, I'm struggling right now. We just kind of see the content that's pushed out at us, and everything might seem fine, but I'm here to be very honest with you guys in that I have struggled a lot with feeling burned out or feeling that imposter syndrome with being a tarot reader. And I solely right now read for myself. So when you're feeling burned out and you're just reading for yourself, it's like, well, it must be me, right? The next question to ask is, have I put too much pressure on my readings to be right instead of intuitive? Am I expecting the tarot to give me a clear-cut answer rather than allowing space for interpretation? Because I feel that way sometimes, where I go to the tarot for a specific question and I'm really seeking an answer and it's a little bit vague or it's a lot of bit vague, and it almost feels more frustrating. I feel misunderstood by my tarot cards, my tarot reading, my own abilities, again tying into that imposter syndrome and self-doubt. Another question you can ask is, do I need to explore tarot in a different way? Maybe your practice has felt repetitive or uninspiring. Maybe what was once working isn't anymore, and these blocks can be an indication of that. Maybe it's time to really shake things up. Any of those blocks resonate with you, I've got some simple, no pressure ways to help reignite your connection to the tarot. So let's jump into that. The first thing I want to note before going into the ways to overcome a tarot block is to remember that forcing tarot when you feel this blockage can make it worse, and it usually does make it worse. So for me personally, what I try to do is shift my approach to my mindset with these methods here. And the first one is to give yourself permission to pause. This might be the most difficult one of this grouping here, but it's okay to take a break. Tarot will always be there for you when you're ready, and in fact, it will invite you back exactly when you are ready. Don't force it. If you've been doing daily draws for years on end and one day it just isn't working or it doesn't feel right, take a break. Take a short break. It's okay. You don't need to do those daily draws every single day for anyone but yourself. And if you need to skip a week, a couple days, a month, whatever it is, do so. And don't think of it as skipping, as I said. Just think of it as that Four of Swords moment, that period of rest. Sometimes stepping away without as much as you can without that guilt is exactly what you need to reset your connection with the tarot. Another thing is try a different deck. Sometimes working with the same deck, or perhaps you always work with a certain deck at a specific time of year. For example, we're still in winter right now, and maybe you always work with a key group of decks that you feel match the winter season. Try to break out of that. Maybe read with one of your decks that are more summer focused, because sometimes working with the same deck over and over can feel or get stale in a way, and it's not necessarily the deck's fault, right? So just try switching to a different deck, maybe with a different style or energy, as I mentioned. Even doing that can refresh your curiosity and make things feel new again. And it's not even about purchasing a new deck, it's about looking in your collection, maybe seeing what you haven't worked with in a while, or again, what is the opposite of what you would usually work with. Sometimes I feel that really helps me. The third thing I have to help you overcome a tarot block is to simplify your practice. If full readings, I'm talking like 5, 6 and up cards, start feeling overwhelming, or even 3 cards, I mean, that can feel overwhelming at times. It all depends on our energies and what we're going through at the time, but scale it back. Just pull 1 card a day. Try not to stress about interpreting it perfectly, and I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do that. For example, we're like, oh, the 3 of Swords, and we have that initial intuitive hit, and then when we go to read the guidebook or a reference book and we're like, dang, that's the complete opposite of what I was thinking, we can really discourage ourselves. But the thing is, that intuitive hit is the right message for you at that time. Let the card sit with you, reflect on it casually, and see what comes up naturally. Don't force it. And I think I had commented on Shanna D, her channel here. She put out her monthly wrap-up video for January, and I believe we had a little discussion about this exact thing. Like, don't force it. Sometimes we aren't meant to know the answer right away. Sometimes we are called to really sit and reflect on that message, and sometimes we might not even understand the message until after the fact, and that's perfectly okay, because we can go back to that. We can see things with clearer vision. And if you are just pulling daily cards and you're like, well, how do I scale it back? I'm just doing daily draws, then refer back to the first point here, which is to give yourself permission to pause your practice. Another way to help you overcome the block is to journal freely, and it kind of ties into that morning page notion of just free writing. Don't let yourself edit what you're writing. Don't let yourself overly think about the next sentence or the next thought that you want to put down. Just try journaling about how you feel in this moment with a particular card, or even write about your tarot block, your emotions that are coming up, or even how you wish your practice felt right now. There's no structure to free journaling, and there's no pressure. Just open up that space to freely express yourself. And as someone, I mean, I operate in this way. This is such an important point for me, because I often find that if I don't talk about something, or if I don't journal about something, it festers in my mind. It lives there rent free, as they say, and it can really become so toxic in a way. I can't get it out of my mind. So even if you don't have the energy to journal, because I'm right there with you. Sometimes I'm like, I can't even, and that goes for keeping a digital journal as well. Sometimes what I'll do if I'm feeling low energy is I'll type out a journal entry, on my notes or in a Word document or something like that, and I transcribe it later in my journal. But sometimes I'm feeling so low energy that that's not even an option for me. But simply talking about it with someone who's safe, or even out loud to yourself. Sometimes talking it through with yourself, if you don't have anyone safe to talk to about your practice, would work perfectly too for this point. The next way I have noted down here to help overcome a tarot block is to use tarot more creatively. If reading tarot is starting to feel more like a chore, try engaging with tarot in a different way. Draw a card and then write a short story about it, or create an art piece inspired by it. Or you could even meditate with it instead of doing a traditional reading. Where does this take you in your mind? What story? Close your eyes and just visualize either putting yourself in this situation, letting it play out in your mind like a literal play. I think that would be a really great way to work with the tarot, but in a little bit of a different way, with a little bit of a twist. And the final thing that I have here to help you overcome a practice block is to do a tarot reset ritual. Sometimes energies can get stuck and stale. But introducing like an energetic refresh can really work wonders. And you can try cleansing your decks, reorganizing your tarot space, cleansing your tarot space, like not only smoke cleanse it or sound cleanse it, but like open your window, let some fresh air in, take your decks off of where you store them, clean them, dust them off. Try rearranging, not only, if you have your decks on a shelf, rearrange them by color or by theme, or even just put them on different shelves and see how that feels. Just set a new intention in that way for your practice, because when you do those things, you're kind of doing that inherently anyway. It can be simple as maybe it's a specific deck you're feeling a little stale with, but it can be as simple as shuffling your cards mindfully or lighting a candle to really reset the vibe. I think that's a really helpful thing for me, is make cleansing a ritual in its own right. Give it a day or two to rest, to really set in that new refreshed energy. So what do you do if you try all of these things and you still feel disconnected from your practice and from reading cards? Well, I'm here to tell you that that's okay too. Sometimes a long lasting block is a sign that your relationship with tarot is evolving. That's a really good thing, right? Because we don't want it to ever be the same. We want to constantly learn and constantly grow. At least that's a personal value of mine. Maybe instead of reading tarot constantly, it's time to receive it differently. Try watching tarot videos here on TarotTube. Maybe study tarot history, or you could even explore oracle decks instead. I remember there was a period of my practice where oracles just felt more refreshing, and I was getting more intuitive hits, and I was just getting along better with it at the time than I was tarot, so I focused on my oracle decks. You could read a book about tarot, maybe a book that you've been wanting to read for a long time but you haven't had the time. But if you're going to sit down reading your cards like in a spread or doing a daily draw, maybe you read about it in a book, and with that it'll give you new ideas and it will reinvigorate your passion about tarot, your want to read with the tarot. It's also okay to let your practice shift in this way. It doesn't have to look the same forever, and I think that's a huge hurdle to overcome when you feel like nothing else has really been working. But it's okay to acknowledge that your practice is changing and kind of let sitting with that guide you to where it's going. The important thing is to trust your own instincts, trust your intuition, your own rhythm. Your intuition is not gone. It's what I would call like recalibrating. And I think it's such a beautiful thing. At the end of the day, tarot blocks are overall temporary, right? They're just temporary. They don't define you as a reader, and it doesn't mean that you've lost your touch or your connection. The important part is to remember to be patient with yourself, experiment with different approaches, and trust that your intuition will return or feel more aligned with the tarot in its own time. Ooh, what a great card to end on here. But I'd love to hear from you guys. Have you ever gone through a tarot block? What helped you move through it? Let's share in the comments and support each other if we're going through this. As always, thank you all so much for being here and spending some time with me today. And until next time, see you around.